It's a little different if you're a full-time yoga teacher and you're working for a studio and all of your opportunity on the business side comes from your relationship with that studio. It's not to say there's anything bad or wrong. It's just that in the model that I've created, it is 100% an entrepreneurship. It either sinks or swims 100% on the basis of what I do. There is no backup. There is no studio. There is no boss. There is no paycheck. There is nothing unless I create the opportunity.
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Rekha and I am your host. I hope you're having a great day as you're listening to this week's podcast. Welcome if you're a new listener, and if you are a returning listener, thank you so much and welcome back. So if you're new, I just want to share a little bit of background about this podcast called Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. I started this podcast because I am a full-time yoga teacher and I wanted to start a podcast that I wish I had when I started out as a brand new yoga teacher. I wanted to know what it's like to be a full-time teacher. I had so many questions, like how many classes I need to make, how many classes I need to teach, what are the going rate for teaching yoga class at a gym or yoga studio or private yoga. So I have so many questions, and also question whether it was possible to be a full-time yoga teacher. So I started asking around to the community of yoga teachers around me, but sometimes the stories or numbers just did not add up. So I kind of had to figure it out on my own, how to kind of survive and make it work and be sustainable as a full-time yoga teacher in Los Angeles. So I wanted to create this podcast where I get to ask questions and share the journey of full-time yoga teachers from across the world who are making it work, making it happen. They are actually making a living doing what they love as a yoga teachers. Sometimes I do interview part-time teachers or teachers who's not really teaching or teaching much, but they are still in yoga industry or yoga world, doing what they love and making it work because they love yoga so much. So I hope you're enjoying these interviews and conversations I've been having with yoga teachers from all over the world. Sometimes I do shorter episodes that's a little bit more of a educational, informational conversations that I'm having with other yoga teachers about a specific topic. So I hope you're enjoying those as well. Couple updates before we get started on this week's episode. I do want to say that I have been teaching SmartFlow 200-hour teacher training since February of this year. So right now it is end of April. So we just finished weekend 6 of the teacher training, and we have only 2 more weekends to go. And we meet every other weekend, which has been a great pace for me, and I hope for the students as well. And every time I teach a teacher training, or I'm part of a teacher training, assisting or teaching a sections of teacher training, I'm always reminded of just how much I love teaching teachers. I love teaching people who really care about yoga, want to learn about yoga, really want to deepen their skill sets and knowledge about yoga, and also want to embody their yoga into their day-to-day life and how they interact with the world. And that kind of lead me to the next section of this is why I started my mentorship program for yoga teachers. I was seeing that many teachers who graduate from 200-hour teacher training felt like they didn't have a support that they maybe had during the 200, and they wanted to continue being supported, or they wanted a community of other yoga teachers to lean on and support and encourage one another, and also a mentor that they can go to when they have questions or when they are going through a challenging situation, or just want an advice from somebody you can trust who also understands what it's like to be a yoga teacher. So it's something I wish I had when I was brand new yoga teachers. Like I said earlier, I was a little bit lost trying to figure out how to be a yoga teacher and make a living when I was new. And also I wish I had a mentor that I could go to ask questions about how much should I be asking? How often can I ask for a raise? How do I teach a private yoga? These kind of questions that I wish I had. So I really put my heart and soul into my mentorship program. I really give 100% of my time, attention, and energy with passion into my mentees, because these are the people who have chosen to want to continue working with me and be part of this amazing community. And that is who I really, really try to put a lot of my passion and care and energy into, really cultivating and creating an environment that they can grow and learn. And I think it's so much better to do that in community, and also a support of somebody who have walked the path. Maybe it's not the same path as yours, but similar path. So anyway, this is to say that my mentorship program's application is now open. I only open the mentorship application 3 times a year. Once you join the mentorship, it's 4 months long. The module is 4 months long, and I have a total of 3 modules per year. So we are about to finish our first module, and we're about to enter the second module. You don't have to have joined the first module to enter the second module. It stands on its own. Every month we meet for yoga philosophy discussions. We have some amazing Q&A sessions. We also have yoga book club. We do pranayama and meditation practice together, as well as talking about alignment and anatomy, and also a practice teaching session. Oh, I want to say one more thing. I also bring in amazing guest teacher about once a month for them to share their expertise in the field, and we get to learn from another expert, another teacher, which is a part that I really love about my mentorship program. So if you're interested, I'll put the link to apply for the mentorship program on the show notes. So I hope you check it out and apply. You are welcome to message me and ask me any questions if you have any questions about the mentorship. I would love to have you join us. One more announcement. I do have 1 room left in my Nicaragua yoga retreat. It was full, but somebody had to cancel. So now 1 room is open for a grab. It can be for 1 person or 2 persons. So you can come with your friends, solo, or your partner. It's up to you. The price will be different whether you're coming solo or joining with another person. This is an ethical yoga retreat, meaning if you want to travel mindfully and ethically and actually think about the footprint and influence and impact that you are leaving behind in the community that you go visit, then this retreat might be something you're interested in. We partner with local NGOs, and some of the retreat activities include volunteering at the local NGOs. Some of the money you pay for the retreat goes directly donated to the local nonprofit organizations. It's not about just going to a beautiful part of the world and enjoying the beauty, but we're actually are going to learn about the local community and have interaction and cultivate relationship with what's happening on the ground. So if you have any questions, let me know. I would love for you to join us at the Ethical Yoga Retreat in Nicaragua. I'll put the link to the show notes for the retreat on the show notes as well. All right, let's get started on this week's interview I had. I'm very excited to introduce you to this week's guest, Karen Fabian. Karen is a yoga teacher, podcast host, author, and the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. With a strong background in anatomy, movement, and rehabilitative medicine, Karen helps yoga teachers build more confident, accessible classes through her programs like the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint. She's also the host of the Conversations for Yoga Teachers podcast and has been teaching since 2002. Today, she shares her inspiring journey from working in corporate healthcare to becoming a full-time yoga professional, how she built a sustainable business, and her insights on growing a career in today's changing yoga landscape. I'm very excited for you to hear this conversation I had with Karen, and I will speak to you on the other side. I do want to mention that there was some kind of technical difficulty, so last maybe 5 minutes of our interview and conversations were gone. So you might have noticed that it may end slightly awkwardly or incomplete. So I really apologize for that. And I apologize, Karen, for that. But majority, 95% of the interview is still in there perfectly. So you can still enjoy 95% of the conversation we had, but just wanted to say that last 5 minutes, I would say, is gone for some reason. So apologize for that, but you will still love the conversation. Welcome, Karen, to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. Yes. So please tell the listener, where are you logging in from? And also, where are you from?
Yeah, so I am logging in from Boston, Massachusetts, where I've lived for a very long time. But I was born in New York City, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people that live in Boston don't really like people that live in New York because we have a big baseball rivalry. So I don't walk around with my New York Yankees hat on, but I did grow up in New York and New Jersey, and I went to college here in Boston, and that's how I ended up here, and I just stayed. I really love the area. So that's where I'm coming in from.
Nice. Well, I'm curious, is it quite cold there still, or
I
has it
mean,
warmed up?
we're starting to get a little warmer. I mean, this is
Yeah.
definitely an area where we get seasons, but the cool thing about Boston is we don't have extremes. We don't have hurricanes, we don't have tornadoes, we don't have extreme cold or extreme snow. We don't really have extreme heat like Arizona, or even out by you in LA. Sometimes it gets really, really hot. So it's a really livable climate, which these days is kind of tough to find. So right now it's getting warmer, but definitely not. You're still wearing your jackets.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm curious to know, when did your yoga journey start? Like, how did you get introduced to yoga? And also, what made you want to become a yoga teacher? That's like a whole another, I feel like, step that, not just loving yoga, but there's something in you that made you want to become a teacher. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Sure. I actually went to my first yoga class because a friend of mine, who's a guy, said, I'm going to this really hard workout and I don't think you can do it. And I was like, I bet I can. I was pretty athletic and going to the gym and running a lot. And that was my first, not my very first, that was actually my second time taking a yoga class. I'll tell you about the first in a second. But that experience of taking that yoga class, it was 1999 here in Boston, Massachusetts, when there really weren't that many yoga studios. In fact, yoga in Boston was so new in terms of going to a studio to take class. We were a little bit behind like the LA area in terms of when studios became more common, that I can remember the first couple of years you went to yoga class, people actually could pay with a personal check. Like we actually would be lined up to pay, and you could pay with cash, check. I mean, it was that long ago. And I took that first class and I had an experience of just knowing that that's what I was designed to do. But it really, the reason for that connection really is part of my personal journey before I got to that class. When I started going to college, I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. I came out of high school really interested in going into medicine. I didn't want to be a doctor. So I thought, if I work as a physical therapist, I'll work with doctors in hospitals. And so I started training. My academic training was to be a physical therapist. And then 2 years into the program, after cadaver lab and the pre-med courses, I started to worry. I don't think I want to just work with people's arms and legs and spine. I think I want to work with their mind too. And I didn't really know what that would look like. So I ended up getting my undergrad in rehab counseling, and I worked as a social worker and a discharge planner in a hospital setting. So I was in the medic setting, and I was really loving the anatomy and the physiology and the biology and the clinical treatment plans. And it was all focused on rehabilitation. So I really, really loved that. But I still wasn't sure this is what I wanted to do full time. And I ended up getting a couple of other job opportunities outside of hospital settings where I worked in healthcare on the business side of things. And I actually started doing really well. I had this pretty big corporate type healthcare job and I was making really good money. And it was at that point that I went and took this yoga class with a friend of mine. And when I took the class, I thought, this is such a great blend of anatomy, physical therapy, working with someone's mind. It was very holistic. It was very focused on longevity and general wellness. Anybody of any age could do it. So that experience of going to that class, it just hit me. I said, this is what I want to do. But at that point, I was very ensconced in being a corporate type person and carrying a Coach bag and spending money and going out to dinner with my girlfriends. And I couldn't think about how was I going to be a yoga teacher. It seemed like, and again, this was 22 years ago, it was pretty grassroots at the time. And so I thought, let me just start with some trainings. And the studio I went to had a training regimen, training protocol. So I took that first 200-hour teacher training. And then the gig was up. Then I just knew this is exactly what I want to do. So I crafted a plan to leave my job, to sell my house, to buy a small condo in Boston closer to the studio that I wanted to work at, that I was training at. And over a period of maybe 2 years or so, I quit my job, sold my house, moved into the condo, lucked out and got a job working for the teacher I was training under. And literally in the span of about 2 years, reshaped my life and what I was doing to support myself and to feel like I was doing what I wanted to do.
Thank you for sharing that. How was your teacher training like? Because that was, you said, how many years ago?
My first teacher training was 2002, was
Yeah.
before Yoga Alliance even existed. Matter of fact, I worked for Baron Baptiste. He was my original teacher, and I
Uh-huh.
wrote the first application for our program to Yoga Alliance. We were one of the first schools to submit an agenda for a 200-hour training. It was literally on the cusp of the beginning of
Yeah.
setting standards for what training should have and that sort of
Uh-huh.
thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
So,
it was a long time ago, and I think because of that, I have this perspective where I can kind of think back, I can look ahead, I can be in the middle. It gives me this kind of interesting point of view.
yeah, I'm just so curious about that teacher training during that time because like you said, teacher training wasn't like a big popular thing
Yes.
that it's all over like it is right now.
Yes.
And I feel like whenever I hear the story of or speak to teachers who became teacher during that time, many of them didn't really go through a Yoga Alliance approved 200 hour. They just kind of started assisting their teacher. And one day their teacher want to sub for me while I'm gone. And that's kind of how they became a teacher back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So
I think
interesting.
for me, I had a little more of the formal training. I mean, even though it
Uh-huh.
was in the beginnings of things being formalized from a industry standpoint, we had a pretty organized and step-by-step way we were trained. But it
Uh-huh.
did have a lot of sort of what you described. We did a lot of apprenticeship work in the
Yeah.
studio. We did a lot of volunteering. We did a lot of assisting senior teachers for no
Uh-huh.
pay, simply for
Uh-huh.
experience. It was
Yeah.
very much part of the community that every class had an assistant. Every class
Mhm.
obviously had a teacher, and every class had an assistant. And the assistant was often a teacher in training or a newer teacher. So,
Yeah.
and we had weekly meetings with senior teachers. Was similar to what you describe. It was much more of a close knit, supervised experience, and teachers
Yeah.
were really supported in their growth. We were doing
Mhm.
hands-on assists, like, all the time. It was very different than it is now because of a lot of reasons. There's a lot more
Mhm.
trainings, there are a lot more teachers, there's online trainings, there's just so many different things now than then. And like you say, for somebody who's looking for a teacher training right now, oh my goodness, there's so many options. A lot of the
Mhm.
conversations I have with teachers are to simply help them think about what are the factors in making a decision about what training to go to.
Mhm.
Back when I started, you went to the training of the person whose class you were attending, or at least you went to the training in the studio where you went to class regularly. It was
Mhm.
very much the obvious choice that if you want to be trained as a teacher, you're going to go to the studio where you practice because you know
Mhm.
the teacher, you know the studio, you know the style. But these days, people sign up for a training. They don't know the teacher. They've never met the teacher. They don't know if the
Yeah.
style resonates with them. So it's a very
Yeah.
different, it's a lot more disconnected from what we're talking about
Yeah.
here.
Yes, I agree with you from what I've seen and heard and learned. I really appreciate the older format of like really assisting the teachers and being around the teacher, being in the classroom and really like learning from being near your teacher.
Mhm.
And my I did my teacher training at Yoga Work. So they
Mm.
at the time there was teachers really trying to maintain that style of learning. So not so much in 200, but in 300, we had a mentor. We had to assist the mentor's class. We had to be there and learn from just like watching your teacher teach. And you slowly start to offer hands-on assist in the classes. And you have one-on-one mentorship with your
Yes.
teacher and mentor. And it was a longer program, because it took a long time to learn those kind of knowledge. So
Right.
I really do appreciate that teacher to student passing down knowledge. I think it's really a beautiful thing. And I think it's maybe missing now. And also maybe it's maybe starting to like become lost a little bit
Mm.
now. I really appreciated that part of my training. And how long was your teacher training? Your 200 in
So
that kind of
we
style?
we went away. We went to Tulum, Mexico for a week,
Oh,
and it was
nice.
an immersion. And that's
Uh-huh.
another sort of aspect to the experience that I think is different. I mean, these days you can take a training online, nothing good, bad, or wrong. It's just something you can do. So it loses that immersion aspect. You can take a training over the weekends, over a period of months. So the way that I experienced it was disconnect from my life, go to a different country, work for basically every day for a week to learn all I could with, I don't know, almost 100 other people. It was a really intense experience. And that was really the start. And similar to what you were saying before, and I agree with you, I think it is a lost way of teaching teachers. And that's why, in the program that I have for yoga teachers, a big component is coaching. And I do that, albeit on Zoom, but I do it instead of just sending people to watch videos because I agree with you. That aspect of working with a teacher and being able to bring your concerns, bring your questions, bring the problems, and to have one on one time with that person can be so important. I've seen teachers really transform in that model versus even a group in person model because sometimes people get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, you said it took about 2 years for you after you finished your training till you, or maybe just like you quit your job and sold your
Yeah.
house and like became, I guess, a full-time yoga teacher. So I'm curious about that journey. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it was so different back then than it is now. I'm sure maybe it was harder to be a full-time yoga teacher back then. I don't know. So I'm curious about your journey of finishing your first training.
Yeah.
You said it took a few years for you to become like, okay, I'm doing what I love and also I can make a living from what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that transitional journey.
Yeah. I mean, there was sort of the yoga aspect of it and then the business and practical aspect of it. So, from the point of view of the yoga aspect, I really put all my eggs in one basket. I wanted to teach at this location for this person in this community. It was my studio as a practitioner. It was where I did my teacher training. So, again, the path for me was clear, even though it wasn't obvious that I was going to get hired to work at the studio. Because I think in part I was so dedicated and I'd put in so much time volunteering and I was doing all the things that I could do to be visible and show my commitment, I did get a job teaching there. And I also, because I had good business skills and good just management skills, I also worked behind the scenes on the business side of the studio. So I did a lot of the planning for teacher trainings and I did a lot of the management of products we sold. So I had sort of a dual role. Now, having said that, over a period of, I don't know, maybe a year and a half to 2 years, as I was looking at the money I was making, I was not making enough money to cover my expenses. So I had this sort of dual thing going on where I was loving what I was doing, but I wasn't making enough money. And so at one point, I took out a business loan and I was starting to use that loan to supplement because I originally, when I sold the house, had a little nest egg from selling the house. And I knew it was going to take me some time to build up my teaching schedule. So I had that little nest egg of profit from selling the house as a way to sort of cushion the shift from working in corporate to teaching full time. When that money went away, I took out a loan. And then it got to the point after about 3 years or so where I had to have a heart to heart with my parents because I didn't know who else to talk to. And I said, look, I'm $30,000 in debt. I absolutely love teaching, but I'm just not making enough money. And so what I decided at that point was to go back to my corporate job and to teach part time, to keep that going, but to give me income more consistently so I could start to pay off my debt. So I did that for about 18 months. And right around that point is when there was a really big economic crisis happening in the United States because there were all these mortgages that people had taken out, but they couldn't afford them. And banks were going out of business because people were forfeiting on their mortgages. And a lot of people were getting laid off from their jobs. And students of mine were coming to me saying, I can't go to yoga anymore because I lost my job and I don't have money for class. And I thought to myself, what if I had a studio space where I could offer classes really cheaply that at least people could take yoga, which obviously they need right now more than ever. So I found this really weird space. It was a renovated gas station. A friend of mine was a realtor and he said, you can use this space. They're going to turn it into an art gallery, but you can use it for right now. And so I called it bare bones yoga as a way to reflect that you're just going to bring your mat, your towel, and your water. We're going to teach a class. I'll have this like temporary banner hanging outside and it's just on yoga and it's $10. And I did that for several months. And at the time, this was 2009 or so, in Boston, there still weren't a lot of studios. So I was getting a lot of people. There wasn't really a studio even around. It was right behind Fenway Park, the baseball field. And after a number of months, I had to give up the space, but I kept the name. And I said to myself, if I take this name, which resonates with me because I teach anatomy, so it sort of had that dual purpose. And I had this epiphany where I was like, I can do this on my own. Instead of how I did before, where I sort of hitched my wagon to one teacher's system, community organization, what if I go out on my own this time and I look for my own teaching opportunities in a variety of studios, in a variety of places, none of which I did the first time. So I quit the job again. I took the name Bare Bones Yoga and I went out. At this point, my version 2.0 was to go out on my own. And I started to build a whole portfolio of teaching opportunities in a whole bunch of different places, including nonprofits for kids, schools, libraries, nursing homes, privates, corporate gigs, wellness presentations. I had a spreadsheet with like 20 different tabs that were all representing different business silos, different business verticals. And I was in part like a sales and marketing person, and I was in part a yoga teacher. At the same time, I was writing my first book. I was teaching anatomy in teacher trainings because that was something that people knew I was good at. And they would have a 200-hour training and they would say, why don't you teach the anatomy part? So slowly but surely, I was starting to create this really rich portfolio of different teaching opportunities. All the while, I kept saying to myself, I need a part of what I'm doing that's scalable, because I'm never going to be able to create a sustainable business if all I'm doing is teaching classes. So I knew in my head, because I understood anatomy really well and how to teach it easily so people could understand it, I knew in my head that I could build a program focused on that, put it on the internet, and then I could sell that to anybody in the world. And that became the catalyst to me creating my own program where I teach anatomy for yoga teachers and how to use it in your cueing and your sequencing so you feel more confident when you're teaching. And long before Zoom was popular and online learning was popular, I developed a relationship with a Canadian company that has a platform called Thinkific, and I built my first course. And now I have all these teachers that enroll in that program. They're in that program. I can sell it to people anywhere in the world. I have teachers all over the world that I work with, but I do it one-on-one. Getting back to what we talked about before, it's not enough in my mind to just build something like that that's just videos and just tell people watch these videos. I wanted and knew the best way for people to learn would be to be working with me, just like we're talking here. Pull out the skeleton, talk about how your classes are going, talk about how to share anatomy in your cues, talk about why you don't feel as confident as you want to, talk about some of the fears that come up when you walk into the room, talking about how to apply philosophy, like all these different things. So that became part of the program to really make it a more rich experience for the teacher.
That sounds amazing. That it sounds like you really started offering online training before online training was
Yeah.
popular or was a thing, or
Yep.
maybe not many yoga teachers were doing that back then.
Yep.
And you kind of already had your, seems like your
Mhm.
niche in anatomy that people
Yeah.
were coming to you for help.
Yeah.
So I know how you said there was a switch that was made in your head when you realized I need to scale to be able to
Mhm.
make this into a living.
Mhm.
And if just teaching group classes there's a limit to how much you can teach. And,
Yeah.
and also not sustainable to keep teaching so many classes.
Yeah.
Um, and at the time, I'm curious, was there other full-time yoga teachers around you, or was it more like rare to find other teacher who were also working full-time as a teacher?
The full-time yoga teacher model back then, so we're talking like 2010, 2011, up to maybe
Mhm.
2015, it looked like teaching either for one studio system and you had a lot of classes and you also taught their teacher trainings. So,
Mm.
whether it was, I don't think at that point YogaWorks had made its way to Boston, but there were community studios here in Boston that had several locations. And there was a model of teacher that would teach during the week, let's say, I don't know, 15 classes, and then additionally teach part of that studio's teacher training program and teach workshops. So that was a model that you would I would call a full-time teacher. The factor, though, of that model was that the person was always doing to earn the money. If you didn't
Mm-hmm.
go to the class, you didn't make the money. If you didn't teach the workshop, you didn't make the money, right? And you were
Mm-hmm.
always limited by who could physically show up.
Yeah.
So I knew early on when I wrote 2 books, and when I wrote the books and I started to sell them on Amazon or wherever I on my website, but Amazon as well, I started to think about what can I do once that I can then repurpose and
Uh-huh.
reach more people. The money part was secondary. The primary thing
Uh-huh.
was I want to reach more yoga teachers beyond Boston.
Uh-huh.
And sure, I can get on a plane and fly to different places, but that's not as efficient as if I can create something that lives online that I can then get the word out. And so
Yeah.
I was a very early adopter of YouTube, Facebook, obviously Instagram, but these things were very new at this point. So a lot of it
Uh-huh.
really was YouTube, creating
Uh-huh.
videos on YouTube. And there was at that point in time, there was a version of a full-time teacher that had a YouTube aspect to what they were doing where they were making money virtually through YouTube. But this was even
Uh-huh.
before Facebook and Instagram existed, if you can believe a time like that.
Uh-huh.
I lived through that time and, so as all of these other ways to use social platforms to get the word out about yourself as a teacher and offers you had, as those things started to emerge, I was already creating the program online. So I just started, using those platforms. And then about 6 years ago, I started my own podcast. So that was another way for me to just open up my laptop, record an episode, maybe interview a teacher like we're doing here, and build my community anywhere in the world by using the platform of a podcast.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, I mean, I can remember the day that here in Boston, I taught my last yoga class, March 13th, 2020, before
Uh-huh.
we shut down for COVID.
Yeah.
That was a Friday here in Boston. That Monday is when all the studios shut down. And at that point, I had been teaching for 20 years in Boston. 2 of the studios I had taught for them for over 10 years, and they just evaporated. They went away. They obviously had to close in the near term, but they never were able to, reestablish themselves, both of those studios. And
Uh-huh.
yet that same day, I just shifted all my focus to my own online program. So I
Uh-huh.
never missed a beat. And in fact, I had more teachers enroll because at that point, if you remember, nobody could do anything in person. There was no in person training and everybody was scrambling to get their 200 hours online, but I was already online. So that was just a different experience for me, at least in regards to that aspect of what was happening. But it just to me was more evidence that having that asset online was so important for me when I look at my business as a teacher, right? If we just
Uh-huh.
look at it through the lens of building a sustainable business, well, you need
Yeah.
assets that can sell and/or you are the asset that sells, right? And so
Uh-huh.
there is that model of teach a bunch of classes. You can do that. It just gets a little hard if you want to go on vacation or if you get hurt. Now, all of a sudden, how are you going to make money? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good point that you bring up, and also amazing to hear your journey of going through that.
Yeah.
And how are you finding, like, when you first started offering online classes or the, courses on
Yeah.
Thinkific, how are you finding students to
Mm.
purchase that? Like, I feel like that's another part, right? People can create online classes or courses, but then this marketing and promotion is another part that, like, okay, now it's out there, but who's going to
Yeah.
buy it?
Yeah. And there is a whole other area of expertise that you develop because let's face it, what you're doing when you are a full-time yoga teacher is, especially if it's in the model like I described, where you are 100% doing it on your own. It's a little different if you're a full-time yoga teacher and you're working for a studio and all of your opportunity on the business side comes from your relationship with that studio. It's
Uh-huh.
not it's not to say there's anything bad or wrong. It's just that in the model that I've created, it is 100% an entrepreneurship. It
Uh-huh.
either sinks or swims 100% on the basis of what I do. There is no backup. There
Yeah.
is no studio. There is no boss. There is no paycheck. There is nothing unless I create the opportunity. So I needed to learn a whole other world of internet marketing, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, for me, I've been on the Thinkific platform for 10 years. I've taken a number of entrepreneurial programs specifically focused on digital marketing that had nothing to do with yoga, but everything to do with what you said. How do you create a program online and somehow get the word out about it?
Uh-huh.
And so at this point, I've become, I don't want to say a master, but I've gotten really good at leveraging internet marketing techniques to
Uh-huh.
find my ideal yoga teacher that I can help. And I would say to
Uh-huh.
anybody listening who wants to create something, an offer, a program, something they're going to sell online, the first step is you must identify who is it for and how are you going to help them? Because what most people do is just let's take what we're talking about here. I want to help yoga teachers. I want to help them be better teachers. Not good enough, not specific enough. The challenge with internet marketing is everybody is getting inundated with so many marketing messages all the time. All it takes
Uh-huh.
is 5 minutes on Instagram, and your brain is just swimming in all these different offers and things you could do. But
Uh-huh.
if somebody in your Instagram feed says something in their video that you hear and you say to yourself, oh my God, they're talking to me, you will stop and you will listen to what their message is. So, that I would say from a high level is one of the most important aspects of finding your people is
Uh-huh.
you have to know who that person is and you have to be able to say, here's the problem I'm going to fix if you work with me. And that
Uh-huh.
is, it takes a little time and development to figure out who is my person. And that's part of the sort of the marketing technique. But that's from a high level how you start it.
Uh-huh. And I know you mentioned earlier that you had to get some loans, business loans in the beginning because it was challenging to make enough money to earn living as a
Yeah.
teacher in the beginning. So how long do you think it took for you from like I guess when you became a yoga teacher to the
Yeah.
point that you feel like okay, I'm making it. I'm
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
enough money to do what I love. How long do you think that took for you?
Yeah, so I would say it probably took 5 years. My first book is called Stretched: Build Your Yoga Business, Grow Your Teaching Techniques. And I wrote that book
Mm,
after I got myself through this whole challenge, and I wanted to write a book about what I had experienced to share with yoga teachers all that went into how I got out of the mess I was in. And it wasn't really a mess, but it was definitely a problem. And because I have a pretty significant business background, I could pull from that to write a book like that and have it be both yoga teacher focused, talking about teaching techniques, but also a whole front end of the book about the business of running a yoga business, not a studio. That's a very different model. I'm talking about an independent yoga teacher who wants to teach full time. So, having said it took about 5 years, the other piece I didn't mention, which I'll just throw out here, is when I quit my corporate job, like I said, I had taken some money from the sale of my house, I put it in the bank. The next thing I did was I started a personal chef business because I could cook. And I
mm,
knew if I had a personal chef business and I cooked for clients, I could do that and teach classes and use that personal chef income as a way to bridge the gap until I built my schedule up. So there was quite a bit of logic and quite a bit of just practical planning that went into those years as I was building my business. And I would definitely say to anybody listening, the worst thing you can do is just spontaneously quit your job and say, I want to teach full time, and just sort of come back from your teacher training and just quit your job. I would say in today's times, 2025, the main reason for that is you have no benefits. When you quit your job, you have no benefits. Right now, I pay $700 a month for my health insurance, and I've paid for my own health insurance for as long as I've been an entrepreneur, which is, I don't know, 20 years at this point. But that is one of the things I always share with people. As soon as you quit your job, you have no health insurance. Forget about saving for retirement unless you do it on your own. You have no dental insurance. You have no safety net. And you definitely, the most important thing is you have no health insurance. So these are all things that take thoughtful planning around, unless you are a totally free to be type person, or maybe you have a partner who can support you, right? Everybody's situation can be different. I had a couple of friends who did leave their jobs to teach full time, and they had a partner, and they were able to get on that person's health insurance and have financial support for from that person. So everybody's situation will be different. It's just really important to map it out. And that's why I wrote the book, to give
Mm,
people the things that they can think about before they quit their job.
yeah. No, I appreciate that because it is true. We don't have health insurance that provided, or a retirement plan, or 401k. So we do
Right,
have to think about all of that as
right.
a independent full-time yoga teacher.
Totally.
Yeah. And I'm curious, for the pandemic, what did much of your business or offering change for you, since you kind of already made the shift to be teaching and offering online courses and kind of leaving that studio model? So did the pandemic have a huge effect in your teaching and your career? So I'm curious, like, how did it have impacted you? And also, has anything changed or shifted since now that we're out of the pandemic for your
Yeah.
business?
So even though I had the online program, I still was teaching very actively. And part of it was there was a part of me that was afraid to give up teaching the in person classes, because I wasn't putting all my eggs in the basket of my program was going to work. So there was a part of me that was afraid to give up my classes. And when the pandemic happened and that March 13th happened, which was that Friday, and then that following Monday, we got the emails, the studio shut down, the studio shut down. That day, I would say I lost 40% of my income overnight, maybe even a little more,
Mm,
because I was still teaching so much in person, and I had this
yeah.
block around walking away from it. But
Right.
I had to walk away from it. I had no choice because everything obviously shut down because of COVID. So in that moment, on the entrepreneurial side, the universe sort of gave me this opportunity that I wanted, but I was unwilling to do by myself. I really wanted to give up those classes. I really wanted to focus on my program 100%, but I was scared to give up my teaching because I wasn't sure I could support myself just focusing on the program. So in the immediate, I was fortunate and I was very resourceful. And I found that the city of Boston was giving out grants to small businesses to help them. There was a lot going on in Boston in the first 90 days of COVID, where
Mm,
a lot was being offered if you were super savvy and diligent and looking for how can I get help as a business. And so I got a grant. So I had a little bit of cushion there. And then I just really ramped up the marketing of my own program. And the other thing that happened was after about a month, the studios I taught at and some other ones had gotten their online setup in place. And they asked me to teach anatomy in their 200-hour trainings, which were now
mm,
virtual, which
yeah.
if I didn't have my own program, I would have completely freaked out. How would I teach anatomy online, but because I had been doing it in my own program, it was easy for me to do. And I was so grateful for those opportunities. I have such fond memories of those trainings because it was such a scary time, but the teachers were so grateful that they could still do their 200-hour, and it was a distraction from all that was happening. And so it created different opportunities for me. And now, obviously we got sort of through the pandemic, and there was probably from 2020, whenever you want to consider everything back open, I don't know, 2022, let's say, there was still a number of years where I did not teach in person. But in 2024, in the beginning of 2024, I said to myself, I want to get back out there and at least have a couple classes a week where I see people in person. It's almost like I felt like I'd been away from the science lab for too long. Like I needed to see bodies moving in real life from a teaching point of view. So I do teach a couple classes a week here in Boston, and I love that it's just a small part of what I do now. Whereas before it was the biggest part and my program was the smaller part. And now I've just shifted how that looks.
Yeah, I loved that, hearing your transitions. And I think you said when the pandemic hit, you lost about 40% or maybe slightly bigger amount of income, and you shifted things around. And you are now back teaching a couple times a week in person classes. And I understand that it is important to be out there and like being interacting human to human teaching yoga, especially if you're teaching teachers. It's so important that you also still have that firsthand experience of
Totally.
continuing to teach in person and
Totally.
still are like growing as a teacher.
Yes.
And so I'm curious about now, what is the percentage of like distribution, or what kind of work you do, different streams of income you have, like
Yeah.
what are in person versus online, or what are pre-recorded content versus like one-on-one thing you do. So what
Yeah.
is that breakout like?
So, this sort of touches on a little bit of the marketing model and the internet marketing model. So if you kind of think of a pyramid, at the base of the pyramid is free content. So my free content really is my podcast. Every single week for 6 years, I have over 300 episodes. I record an episode. It's either solo or guest. The other free content piece I have is my Instagram and my TikTok, but my Instagram is really the driving force. I get most of my connections and exposure on Instagram. I was a really early adopter of YouTube as a yoga teacher. So I have a long-standing channel on YouTube, which at this point I just use to put the video version of my podcast. I don't do videos on YouTube because my people, my ideal person, a yoga teacher who's super motivated, who wants to learn more about anatomy, who wants to feel more confident, that teacher lives on Instagram. So the base of my pyramid is this free content. Along with those places where I share information, I have a number of things that are just free things. Like I have a pretty involved, extensive ebook with a number of different teaching methodologies that I use when I work with a teacher on cueing and sequencing and mindset and anatomy. I have other different things like a yoga sequence template, different free videos on how to do the walk and talk, how to share clear cues. And I use these free sort of training tools as a way to get yoga teachers on my mailing list. And then once they're on my mailing list, I am in touch with the teachers on my mailing list, believe it or not, 4 to 5 times a week. And I have almost a 50% open rate of my emails. That means the thousands of people on my email list, almost half of them open my emails, even though I'm sending 4 to 5 a week. The average open rate for emails is around 20%, and I have almost 50%. So my email list is really engaged yoga teachers who really love the free content I share on the email list. Now, above that is my membership. I have a month-to-month membership called the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. And it's really a fast track way to learn cueing and sequencing for just $29 a month. And I meet with teachers a couple times a month in these live workshops. If they can't make it, they watch the replay. I have teachers from all over the world, and it gives them a way to get together like we are with other teachers, to hear from other teachers. Every week I teach a lesson, and on top of that, they get to hear what other people's questions are and feel like they're part of a community. And then above that is my signature program. It's called the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint, and it takes teachers through my own proven method of learning anatomy, step by step. It's 10 steps. And part of that is meeting with me on these one-on-one coaching calls we talked about. So it's a completely one-on-one program. So the teacher gets exactly what they need. And those things, it's a pretty simple model, but those things are what run my business in addition to the couple classes a week. Every once in a while, I'll do a paid workshop or I'll do a mini training that's paid. The majority, though, of what I do, like if someone gets in touch with me on Instagram and they say, "Hey, I've been watching your videos for weeks. I love what you're all about. I'd really like to work with you. What are my options?" I'll say, "Well, you've got a group option in the membership. You've got a one-on-one option in my Blueprint Learning Program. What are you looking to do?" "Well, I've been teaching for a while and I just don't feel confident. I feel really nervous when I walk into the room. I don't feel like I understand the reason for the cues I'm sharing. I can't remember my sequence. How can you help me?" So we'll have conversations and I'll help them make a choice about either program, what's a best fit for them.
Mhm. I love that. I love the different levels that you have
Yeah.
and different streams of income from different sources, different
Yep.
places. And I guess I would love to hear like what kind of advice would you give to yoga teachers who's listening, who's probably still in the hamster wheel of teaching so many group classes at the studio
Yeah.
and they're trying really hard to make ends meet by
Yeah.
teaching so many classes. What kind of advice would you give to teachers like that?
Yeah. So I've been there. I totally get that. I get that feeling of you want something more than what you're doing. I think that there's sort of two conversations to be had. There's the practical conversation, and then there's the dream, vision, what do I really want to do ultimately conversation. So in a situation like you describe, the first piece is, well, what do you want to do as a yoga teacher? What would that look like? Like traveling and doing boot camps and teacher trainings and retreats? Would it look like having your own studio? Would it look like teaching in a couple of studios and writing a book or creating a course, something like that? The first part is to identify what is your vision. And then along with that, because then you know what you're shooting for, then you know at least the top level of this is what I want. Now let me create a plan to get there. As far as, like you said, somebody who's teaching a lot of classes and they just don't see their way to get to this vision. This is where I think for yoga teachers, it can be challenging because you have to be able to pay your bills. You have to have some kind of income coming in so you're not so stressed that you can't pay your bills. So sometimes, like in my story, I had to go back to work and teach on the side. And that wasn't something I wanted to do, but I knew it was the right decision. So, and at one point in my life, in 2015 to 2019, I worked at Starbucks 4 days a week. I was the first shift from 7 to 12, and I did that to make extra money. It was not something I wanted to do, but in retrospect, it was a great experience. It was something that, interestingly enough, the customers that came to that Starbucks over time knew that I was a yoga teacher. And so they would come to me to order their coffee and ask me, what poses should I do for that? My back really hurts from sitting at my desk. And I ended up, over the years of being there, actually getting teaching gigs and corporate presentation gigs because almost all my customers were corporate people working in
Yeah.
law firms or health insurance companies, all in downtown Boston. So it really turned out to be an amazing side job to have. It worked for my schedule. And the point is, sometimes when you are trying to build something bigger, it makes sense to do something that you might not necessarily at face value want to do, but it's going to bring in some cash. When I had that gig where I started a personal chef business, I loved cooking. I didn't necessarily want to do that, but I knew I could do it to make money. I met amazing families in Boston who just didn't have time to cook. And I loved going there and cooking for them and leaving in their refrigerator a week's worth of meals and leaving and feeling like I had done this amazing work to support this family. So there's always something that will come out of these little side gig experiences that will make you feel like, in a way, it's not teaching yoga. It's helping you, though, build your dream.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that because I think it's important to, hear that side of the
Yeah.
story too.
Yeah.
And I also tell whenever I have my own mentorship program for teachers, and I always tell the story of when I first became a teacher, I was doing whatever I could to make money. So I was teaching spin classes and hit classes. I was checking people in. I was cleaning studios. I was doing all these little things, and I didn't have a car. So I was riding my bicycles around everywhere to go teach classes. And, this challenging time that I wasn't making that much money per class or per hour, but those are the time that, I had to go through that to be able to make enough money to live during that time. And it's also, it's okay that sometimes we go back to have another part-time job or we go back to full-time. I think it's this fluid thing. It's not this one straight line that it's not laid out for us as a full-time yoga teacher. And that's what I love interviewing other teachers on this podcast, because to show that everyone's path is so different and yet people are finding their way to be creative in their business and career and still do what they love and make a living being a yoga teacher. So I really appreciate your story, sharing all of that. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day and we'll keep in touch. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode and the conversation I had with Karen. I hope you gained something out of it. I really loved how transparent and honest she was about sharing different side gigs and part-time jobs that she had along the way of becoming a full-time yoga teacher. Sometimes the path is not just straightforward. We take this windy road to get to where we are. And same with our future, right? We're not really exactly sure. Like sometime maybe your passion will change and your focus will change. Maybe you will no longer be a yoga teacher, or maybe you become another health professionals. And I think that is completely okay. And that is part of your unique path. So I think it's important not to get so stuck on what it should look like and kind of embrace the ebbs and flows and changes that come along the way in your journey. And I think what's important is keep following your passion, keep following what brings you joy and what really lights you up or fill you up as a yoga teacher or as just a human being. So thank you, Karen, so much for coming on and sharing your journey. It was really lovely to talk to you. So that is it for this week. Remember, if you want to join my mentorship program, it is mostly online. We do meet in person sometime, but when we do meet in person, we Zoom you in if you're not from Long Beach, where I live. So I have students from all over the United States joining, as well as I have students from another country joining. So it is open to all, and it is hybrid learning style, both on Zoom, and it'll be recorded, so you can watch recording if you have a busy life and you cannot make it to the live meetings. And about the yoga retreat, I have one room left, so grab that room before it's gone. If you're interested and if you have questions, just reach out to me and I will get back to you. So the easiest way to reach me is my Instagram at Reika Yoga. And if you don't use Instagram or social media, that's completely fine. You can go to my website, www.reikayoga.com, and message me through my website on the contact form. Otherwise, leave a positive or 5-star reviews or stars or anything like that from whatever platform you're listening to this podcast from. But most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, with your yoga teachers, whoever you think might benefit or enjoy listening to this podcast. That is it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you next week.